soundbite like the news.
I know, huh? That's about as good as it gets. All right, we are live. Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to the weekly Jargon. I'm Abel Perez.
Jose Rodriguez.
And Rohi Zachariah.
And together we are the three Jargoneers. Catch us on our horses riding like knights as we yell out, Jargoneers, Jargoneers.
Jargoneers.
Like the Musketeers, right?
That's right.
Well, fellas, today we're talking about the economy and how we're starting to see a lot of different challenges out there, right? Obviously, the obvious one, right? The stock markets took some major hits last week. We'll have our stock guru, Rohi, kind of dive in, give us a little bit of examples. And then, city council member, not speaking on behalf of them, but, very involved, seeing a little bit of uptick in cars on blocks in cities of Madera and Fresno, right? But all signs leading to maybe people being a little bit desperate and looking for outlets for revenue-generating outlets, even if it means crime, right? So let's dive right in.
Yeah,
So,
I know a few days ago I got the photos of the car on blocks in one of our neighborhoods, and and we thought maybe it's a stolen car. It was definitely a very nice block that they're putting it on. So,
cool.
They're at least they have some style and class there. It's not a little cinder block, but I thought it was kind of a one-off until the same day we hear it's Fresno.
Yeah.
And now we're starting to see it's becoming a thing all over town. So
I saw an apartment complex. There was two cars, out of that one complex, both Toyota. So I believe the Toyota vehicle and the Kia, they're Sedona or Sonata. One of those vehicles they're very popular for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. It might just happen to be because the Toyota Camry is the number one selling car in the world, right? And so there's obviously a high demand for tires and wheels, and and how does that what does that have to do with the economy? Well, if you can get them in the black market or off market, right, for half the price, there's obviously some demand for that, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's consumers looking to pay less because they have less. And of course, where there's a demand, there's always going to be a supplier, and that supplier is saying, well, I'll make 100% profit off this. If all I have to do is go sell them, right?
Capitalism.
Not have to worry about distribution.
Minus the block cost. I don't know if their blocks are stolen.
Yeah,
so,
we haven't heard any reports. So if you're missing blocks out there, you might want to retrieve them at some of these sites. Yeah, but no, crime. I took a criminology class, and they always said, when ice cream sales go up, so does crime, right? And that's typically because the correlation is just simply people are out and about, right? Mm-hmm. It gets dark later, whatever the case may be. So people may be cruising around. You typically spending a little bit more, money, and then that's always an opportunity for thieves to say, "Great, thank you for buying that. Now it's mine," right? So.
And that's capitalism at its best, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're looking to be the competitor, right? So like you said, I think the original wheels and or tires may be a little bit expensive, so people find a niche, so to speak, and right, and this is it. This is where people are willing. You said Kia and Toyota Camry, because it's a very high-selling vehicle. It's also not as expensive as others, but it's the parts, right? And it's when you need wheels, then where can I get wheels that are not as expensive?
And so, you're going to need tires.
And you're going to need tires. So guess what? I got wheels and tires. So which ones do you want, right? So if they're quickly pop in, pop out, here you go. We got yourself some wheels.
Yeah.
And that's a shame, because not too long ago you had the same thing with the catalytic converters. Also Toyotas being one of the biggest, the subjects of in question, because those contained some type of catalytic converter that contained the rhodium and all these other minerals that they need that were pricey in the black market. But shoot, man, that is scary, because you're starting to see that more and more people are desperate. You can see the entrepreneurship there, obviously, right? I mean, but it's in the black market. You have people out there trying to satisfy, like you said, a demand. So, and trying to compete with the dealer or with the retail shops around here. And I'm sure there's going to be a demand. People always seek the cheaper product and the cheaper price when there's desperate needs, and I think we're starting to see that. And I think I said it earlier, Rohi, we may be seeing levels of what 2019 was looking like before we got that big injection of stimulus coming through. So
Yeah.
that's kind of where we're at. So now we're back to that. So now what?
Yeah, and you know, we talked about that. I mean, was it good timing on COVID to come around and re-stimulate the economy? I mean, because you know, when we look at it, you know, people come to the shop, for instance, and they're like, "Wow, where's everybody? It's usually popping in here." And I say, "Yeah, this is 2019, man." I mean, and I don't think a lot of people at that time were cued into the fact that like our economy as a whole was really kind of slowing down across the board, and we were kind of getting to this, you know, stalling that if COVID wouldn't have hit, yeah, I mean, we probably would have been already there, like you said, you know.
In the industry, especially in the mortgage industry, I don't know if you recall this, April, but sometime in September of 2019, the Feds tried to increase the rates, and it had a backfire effect. Because soon after that, boom, people felt it quickly. And that wasn't something good. So they knew that, hey, we got to drop this back down. So the only way to really get around that was to create an event. And I'm not saying it was created or a plant, but I mean,
Sure you are. Yeah, you are.
Well, I mean, here,
It wasn't a war, but yeah.
looking back in the way it happens, if you really, you know, look at the history of it and our trends, you know, you start seeing that our economy is not doing so well. So an injection of some sort, whether it's war, whether it's a catastrophic event, or in this case, it was COVID. It just so happened, and coincidentally, that COVID came at the right time, where it actually took people from that, you know, devastating economic trend that was taking place, and it kind of helped boost a little bit. Yeah, it put businesses out of business for temporarily, but it also injected a lot of money in those businesses.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, we had a lot of this stored money. We just couldn't go out and spend it. And then you keep people in with all this savings, and all of a sudden you release the gates, and here's a flush of money. Here you go, let's go. So obviously that created the inflation that we're in. Again, you're trying to create something. There's a cause and effect. So if you wanted to cause this inflationary environment, you had to provide something, and that's a huge expansion of the money supply, and that's exactly what happened. Now we're here, now they're tightening, and now it's creating what they say is a recession. Some are saying no recession, yes recession, a soft landing, a hard landing, which one is it, right? But we're starting to see the effects, right, Abel? I mean, I think you could say that you've experienced that with some of the clients that we have.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so obviously the biggest tool in the Fed's arsenal was, you know, increasing the rates for all, you know, cost of money, and the idea was to slow down consumership, right? Now, I think one of the things that has been, you know, consistent has actually been the sales of homes, right? There's still, because there's such a huge demand and a limited supply, that hasn't been combated too much. And so you talk about stored energy, you know, you have individuals qualifying using, you know, 2, 3, sometimes even 4 people to qualify for a specific home. That home, by the way, selling more at the price the highest price that it's ever sold at, with the highest interest rate attached to that within the last 10 years. It's coming with a nice hefty monthly payment, right? And so the stored money, savings, stimulus that individuals had, it's okay, we can sacrifice for a little bit. Yeah, you know what? I'm willing to pay $3,000 a month because I just want to acquire this home. I want to invest. I want to do that, right? Now you're starting to see, you know, payment number 13, 14, 15 starting to hit as we cross over that, you know, year to 18-month, time frame of rates being this high. And it's starting to get hard now, you know, and it's like, man, this payment sucks, right? This payment is heavy. You know, I can't wait for rates to go down so that I can refinance, right? And that's almost like a more like that. Those are almost the good scenarios. The individuals who still can afford their monthly payment and are still waiting for that refi. There's a lot of individuals right now that are saying, I have equity, I have to refi, otherwise I'm falling behind because I can't last any longer, right? Now the good news is it's very apparent that the reduction of rates is here. And it's certainly not what maybe some sales professionals out there are promoting, right? Rates are down, buy now, right? Well, rates are down fractionally in comparison to where we've been over the last 18 months. But there's still going to be, I would say, another 6 to 12 months before we see that significant reduction in interest rate, right? Where we're going from 6 3/4 down to maybe a 5%, 4 3/4 range, right? And that range, that's where you start seeing a significant. Police are calling the police. I'm on fire. Fire truck's coming. But that's where you start seeing a significant reduction in that mortgage, right? Where it could really make an impact. Savings of anywhere from $200 to $500 a month can really help an individual or a household's budget. So I think there's some light at the end of the tunnel, especially when it comes to mortgage financing. But hang on out there, and if you do need a mortgage or a refi to survive, to get into survival mode, do that before you start becoming late on the payments. Do that before you start taking a hit to your credit, because you still have to qualify for that, right? And that's where you can reach out to Jose Rodriguez, loan officer here in Madera, who can serve you. And hey, he makes a great cup of coffee.
Yes, I do. And with that, the question that I pose to you guys is, assuming that what the Feds did, which is increase by 500 basis points, which is quite a bit unheard of for some time. And they did it strategically, but had you done that back in 2019 without stimulus, where would the economy be?
Yeah.
Could the economy support such an increase? And my answer to that, what I would say is it definitely cannot, because it couldn't. Yeah. There's no way. Without any additional expansion of the money, people could not afford or absorb the shock that was going to take place. And I think that's what took place, is that the Feds certainly realized that, hey, we can't do it in this very volatile economy right now. Something has to happen. So thanks to COVID, it allowed for us to push a lot of money out, and that really certainly absorbed a lot of the inflationary cost. You started seeing homes go up. You started seeing the cost of hospitality. Man, for crying out loud, I went out there yesterday and I purchased a burrito for $15. I mean, prior to that, I think I could get them for $6. So that just tells you how expensive it's getting. But again, wages have to come up with that, right? And the only way to pay debt, especially to the government, is through a secret tax, and that's inflation. So we're paying for that. Somehow we're just not. It's not really ingrained in us that that's an actual tax. It's inflation. No, it's an actual tax. You're actually paying for that on the cost of goods and cost of services that otherwise would not cost you that much had it not been for that much money. So I find it interesting, and if from an economic standpoint, that you need something like that to get to this point. And that certainly happened coincidentally. COVID happened soon after, and here you are. Again, not a conspiracy. I'm just looking at it like, okay, shoot, these typically with these events, you see these major stimulus pushes that the government will provide, and this was more of a global deal because it was happening globally.
But that's what I would disagree. See, is in 2019, for instance, if you were to go, some of the your commodities, like go buy a car. The car was MSRP at $50,000. Would you ever pay $50,000? No. You would negotiate down. There was a rebate of $5,000. The dealer the dealer would give you a couple thousand off of that. And COVID hit, and people lost their minds, and if the car was $50,000, they were paying $70,000. They were paying over its value. So that's where I think when you say the rates had nothing to do with it. If you are willing to pay more than something is worth, and this was across the board, guns was the same way during COVID. A gun that was worth $500-600, we heard they were paying like $800. Why? Because they wanted it. They had, like you said, there was all this stored energy. I have to have it.
Could we assume that it was a different class of consumers, right? In a stabilized or neutral economy back in let's say 19, where you had the individuals who could afford a vehicle, who were in the market, maybe a little bit more disciplined, right? Maybe a little bit more patient, a little bit more acclimated to making such large purchases. So we saw that in the home industry as well, right? The more with real estate, people were paying $5, $10, $20,000 over the appraised value because it was kind of like they didn't know any better. And for them, it was like, okay, yeah, we'll just, we just want to buy, right? We just want to be accepted. And finally, somebody's saying you're approved, right? Because we've gone years without people saying we're approved. And I am talking about your lower middle class and even your high poverty, the people right under the poverty line, where these stimulus opportunities maybe pushed them up a little bit, right? Put them in this like territory or uncharted territory that they weren't accustomed to. And now you have uneducated consumers, right? And I'm not saying, they didn't go to school or whatever the case. They're not used to making those type of transactions. The people that are around them aren't able to give them the consultation, the correct consultation to make a wise type of decision, right? And so you infuse the economy and the people with this extra money. Now they're approving. Now they're able to, they're at the signing table, buying the cars, buying this, and I feel like when I hear that, it's maybe there's a little bit of lack of understanding on how to be a consumer, right? And how the ball is in your court, and you should shop at a few different car lots before making a decision, or you should attempt to negotiate. People became desperate.
And one of the things, Rohi, that we left out is the availability of credit. So at that time when the injection of money's coming through, everybody and their mother can get credit.
Yeah.
Not only credit, you can get it at 0%, 1%. So that flexibility of payments of a $70,000 vehicle become very realistic. Okay, you know what? At that shit, I can pay $700, $800 a month. Yeah. I remember when cars used to be $350, $250. Yeah. Now you're looking at cars that are no less than $700 to $800. If you're buying a car for 70 trucks, 100,000, 110. I mean, that is the reality. And I think when you have availability of cheap credit in comparison to 1%, 0% to 6%, that's a big difference. So when you have availability of credit, people are going to take advantage of it because zero down. You just, no interest payments. You're going to pay. I got it. Okay, I'm willing to pay 20, 10, 15. I got it. $10,000, $15,000 more. Me, sold to the guy out there with the such and such. But that's how people behave. They behave because it was such a frenzy, not only in the car industry, but also in our industry. Yeah. We had a feeding frenzy for refinances. People just all of a sudden gained equity. All of a sudden injected over $100,000 in equity. So what did they do? They refinanced. Everybody went down to a lower interest rate. For us, it was great to see that. Companies, corporations, commercial loans, they all grabbed all these millions of dollars at such a low rate. They bought their stock back. What do you think that did? Elevated the market. You started seeing an elevation in that market. When the market does well, interest rates do well. Yeah. But then when it corrected, now everybody has to pay the piper. Everything come down, and you started seeing some shockwaves around the global markets. You saw that in Japan. It affects us. One small market around the world, don't think it affects us. It does affect us, especially a market like Japan. Yeah. So when these industries fail, it has a shock effect for all of us here because they're connected in some way with all this debt and inflation issues that we have.
But that's why you get to was it planned, a planned failure? Because I remember when stimulus came out, it was about people are falling behind, they can't pay rent, they can't do all these things, and then you gave them a check. They can't pay rent, pay their rent. They can't pay electricity, pay their electricity. But you gave them a free check. They didn't spend a dime on that stuff. They went and bought new. They they got themselves into further debt, And that was kind of the problem is that a consumer should, they set themselves up because if a consumer knows they're paying over something's value, the repercussions are now. Because again, like when they come in and they want to sell that gun because they can't afford anything anymore, well, the gun's only worth half. Okay, they're willing to take that loss. And that's going to come across the board. It's the same thing with that car. That car doesn't appreciate value every year. It depreciates. And you paid over sticker price. So now when you need to go sell it because either you need another car or you just can't afford payments, well, and I know you paid $60,000 for it, but it's really only worth like $30 right now. They're willing to take that. And I think you're going to see that combine. And And I think it's been balled up because when they bought new in 20, 21, 22, whatever, they didn't have to worry about maintenance. They didn't have to worry about anything. And now, guess what? Well, now you need tires. You need, a tune-up. Well, I'm already stretched thin. I maximized my budget to meet this lifestyle, and now I'm adding on top of that, and they don't have any credit left. They don't have any money left. They don't have anything. So now they're going to have to start selling. And it's, what I was telling people is like people looking for a car, I said, just wait, because it's going to come around. And you're already starting to see that. You're starting to see more cars for sale on the street. And,
repos.
The repos are going to start being released, and hopefully not too fast, because that's where you're going to have your hard landing. But they're already starting to leak because people are saying, well, you know what? I need to let this go. I can't afford it.
And that's why the auto industry has never, ever been considered by anybody as a good investment or an investment opportunity. I mean, even from the time I was a kid, it was like, that thing's going to depreciate as soon as you drive it off the lot, right? We've known that. And so, and I'm going to defend the housing market a little bit and promote its ability to overcome these type of challenges because, a home is a lot different than a vehicle, right? The home, typically, especially here in California, Central Valley, we have consistent appreciation, up to 8% over the last 40 years, right? 8% on an annual basis. And so there is a lot more safety and security with an investment of a home. But you think about it, the car, you buy it, has all the bells and whistles, it's great. But not only does it depreciate as soon as you drive it off the lot, but it's aging, right? Mm-hmm. And next year, in 6 months, they're already going to have next year's model. And it's going to be better, right? And then you wait 2-3 years now. So, we're 2-3 years out of COVID, or maybe even almost 4. And that vehicle, that nice, big, shiny vehicle, now you're 3-4 years old now, right? That thing's old. That thing's ancient. You try to go in there, you paid $10,000 above MSRP, and now you're trying to go in there and you're trying to sell it and just trying to break even. Maybe you still owe, $50,000 on it, but to Rohi's point, now it would have been worth maybe $40,000 last year, but now this year it's only worth $35,000, right? So you're just falling deeper and deeper into the hole, and you're going to end up having to eat it, or you just let it go and say, "Hey, Mr. Repo Man, go ahead and pick this up, whatever, right? I'll take the hit, give me a year or two, and my credit will recover, right?"
And what you said there is it's what's happening or what's been happening, kind of like in 2008, but it's happening in the car industry because the car industry or the financing wasn't as regulated as it was for the housing. So this is where you saw a big demand for vehicles, again, above MSRP, people paying, sometimes you would hear 30, 40,000. I mean, just because the Tesla models were not in there, I mean, wow, you can see them now for like $20-some thousand going through the auction, 25. I mean, they're only 2-3 years old, but they're not going for as much. But if you purchase one for $50,000 and you added the bells and whistles, you were looking at $65,000 to $70,000, especially your dual motor. I don't know what class is that, the Y or I always forget which one's the X. But anyhow, I was looking at that and I was just like, how the hell am I going to do that? And I wasn't doing too shabby. But I just couldn't see myself being able to sustain such a big payment, especially if the market was already having, it was starting to have an effect already in our industry. And that started maybe mid-2022. We started seeing it kind of slow down a bit towards the end of 22. And then all of a sudden, 23, we start getting dry. We did see little ups and downs, but nothing compared to what we saw in 2021. I think that if you were in real estate, 2021 was probably by far one of the better years, at least in my career. So we saw how that had an impact. But I like to go back to like the amount of energy that was stored. Had it not been for that, where would we be today?
Yeah.
Would we be in a worse shape? And when you said you think it was planned, well, I mean, I think it's obvious that it must have been planned in some way, that there had to be something. Coincidentally, COVID was there. This is an opportunity to relieve, right? It could have been something else.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, that certainly took you away for that period of time, and it gave you this much time to try to figure things out. And here we are today. They're calling it a soft landing, but people are still hurting. They're hurting in our industry. They're hurting with vehicles. They're hurting in their debt. They're trying to consolidate. How do I get out of that now? One of the things that I see recurring on the social media is these young kids that I believe might not even own homes, but they're telling me to go do an appreciation of equity loan where I can pull money from my house and I don't have to pay it. I mean, here's a young kid that I don't know, maybe you do have a home, but the majority, or maybe they're just influencers. And influencers have a good opportunity of influencing people that don't understand any better. But you don't have a home. How is it that you're telling me to go pull out money on a home where I'm not going to have to pay for it? You are going to have to pay for it. And you're going to have to pay a piece of that equity at some point. What if homes come down? You're still responsible for that money. So I'm a little concerned about that because you see that a lot in social media, and that's an easy way to prey on people and say, you know what? Your home is your ATM. Go get money. You can do it. Don't worry. You don't have to pay anything right now.
Yeah.
So that makes it so much easier for people to jump into these things. And I know they come across me as products that I can offer because truthfully, there's nothing else I can offer you. You don't qualify. You have a 2% loan. How can I get you a refinance at a 7%? Just doesn't make, I'll kill you. You won't qualify.
Yeah.
But an equity line or one of these equity appreciation loans, you can. I mean, I don't think it's going to stop the consumer behavior that you have because once you get a hold of that money, you're going to go right back to what you did before. Yeah. And that's going to be consume, acquire more debt. Some will consolidate, but you'll see them back in 2-3 years in the same line. That's just unfortunate.
And you got to say it, with especially like my industry or anybody else, there's going to be somebody's going to benefit from that. When somebody's willing to take that hit, okay, I'll buy that from you because I got the money and you don't now. Somebody's going to benefit. You want to say that's how the rich get richer, and it kind of was. I mean, you look at, the 2006, 2008. You bought a house for cheap. I remember. I bought one of my homes during that time for half price. Was able to sell it only a couple years later and make quite a bit of money on it. So that's that timing thing of taking advantage of somebody's misfortune.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to come around. Is that
the American way?
It's your capitalism, right? I mean, that's the whole point. I mean, it's sad to say that, but I think that's the positions people have to kind of figure out, and that's why like the people that I know who are maybe looking for a car or something like that. I told them like you don't pay over sticker, just wait. It's got to come full circle. It may take a couple extra years longer than you need to, but just in the car market's going to come. Same thing with guns. I know all these guys they still want to buy guns. I said just wait. Every day somebody's coming in and they're dumping their stuff because they need money for rent or gas or whatever expense they can't afford right now. They're willing to get rid of it just to get the cash right now. That's how desperate they are.
So it begs the question: if like all these vehicles and like all these homes that were purchased throughout this time, does that create also a stored energy of inventory that people are holding on to, just barely biting, hold on because they're at their wits. They can't handle this anymore.
Yeah.
So is there a breaking point for them also to say, you know what, just take the house. I can no longer do this anymore.
Well, I think that was the issue with that 06 thing is like the government essentially gave them a free, walk away, no penalty thing. And you kind of would. I mean, who wouldn't? If you're like, all right, I'm upside down, you're not going to kind of do anything to me. All right, take the house, whatever.
I recall early on in that stage where a lot of people were already doing it quickly. They were dumping their homes as fast as they can.
Yeah.
And then you had the stragglers that just couldn't. They just could not let go of a home where they put in a good portion of their money.
Yeah.
Although their homes were undervalued, way below the loan amount, they just couldn't see themselves letting it go because the investment that was put in there was over $100,000, $50,000 of their hard-earned money.
Yeah.
And they just didn't know how. So some of them rode it till the end, but it really just it drained them financially because they could not. They went through some forbearance. They went through some programs that they had at the time, but for the most part, there had to be a principal forgiveness in order for them to be back. But they had to wait such a long time and go through a painful experience because the trough didn't really happen until like 2013 2012, I think, right? 2008, but it was 4 years later when you saw the lowest that the market had hit.
Yeah.
People thought that right after the crisis, you would see the lowest. No, it took about 4 to 5 years to see from peak to trough. And I think it was in 2014 when you saw the lowest valued homes, or 12, I'm sorry, between 12 and 13.
But you got to remember that's also led to the too big to fail of the banking industry. And I think the banking industry now is even further in trouble because of the credit card debt. They're saying it's like $2 trillion U.S. Consumers are in debt with credit card. That's where it gets scary. Where you say, no, there's no soft landing, because the people who are going to bail you out were the banks. That's who absorbed that loss, during that housing crisis. And this time around, that's why you're already seeing the banks. I mean, how many banks have already folded? We're not even there yet.
At that moment, I think the question was, do we let these major banks fail? Because the majority of these AIG, Citibank, or I'm not sure, these bigger banks that were in really big trouble, Merrill Lynch, you had the Lehman Brothers, you started seeing the fall of all these Bear Stearns. So they said, hey, we can't let this, it's starting to collapse. Yeah. So they had to inject billions of dollars. I think there was a stimulus that passed. I think this was during Bush's exiting years. He says, hey, we can't let this happen. So executive orders happened, certain things happened. Congress came together, said, hey, we're going to stimulate them, pump them back up. We're going to inject. And then all of a sudden you start seeing the manufacturers, GMC, Ford, also inject. I mean, they had to pay it back. But again, I don't think they learned. And again, when you say this is when the government took over the privatization of the Fannie and Freddie, they no longer were private. They're now government. Government absorbed all those bad debts. How do you absorb that and just brush it under the rug? Somebody's got to pay for it.
Yeah, they make a printer in the background.
Right, there you go.
Print the hundreds out.
But anyhow, long story short, we're here today. It's been a long time. I think it's well over a decade now. And shoot. I mean, are we starting to face something similar to that?
Yeah, me is looking at me like I had all the answers. No,
come on, Abe.
I appreciate you bringing up the appreciation equity loan because it is a good example of how corporations and people are starting to prey on these individuals that are going through hard times. And it's like, I'm sure you out there, your parents always told you, if it's too good to be true, it probably is, right? And it, when you're seeing these advertising, these young guys in their T-shirts and gold chain and writing on a whiteboard, and there's a Lamborghini in the background, right? And they're like, I have the solution for you, right? And they're promoting this stuff, but they make it very appealing. But think about the problems that they're solving. They're your problems. They're the problems of the people who are at most have the highest risk of losing their asset, right? They tell you don't need low credit score, that's okay. If you, as long as you have the equity, that's cool. You have 10 years, and 10 years might seem like forever, but that'll creep up pretty quick, right? You have 10 years to essentially pay us back. And that interest could be as high as 30%. 30% of it's not interest, it's 30% appreciation share, right? So that means if your house appreciates in value $100,000 in the next 10 years, they're going to take $30,000, right? And by the way, what happens how do you give them that $30,000? Well, you're either going to have to refinance on a regular conforming loan at that time, so you got to better hope that you can qualify for that, or you got to sell your house, right? That's part of the agreement. And so, and of course, if you can't, come up with that, there you go. They have a lien against you, and they could potentially, come after you for that property. And so, it certainly isn't. These options are good for people who are on their last lifeline, and have a plan, right? So I'll give you an example. I would say an appreciation loan like that's probably for somebody who says, man, I'm struggling. The house is in bad shape. We need to pull this out. We need to fix the house. And I'm going to sell it to try to get my top market value on the property. After I sell it, I'm going to have to pay these people back. But at least we walk away with something, right? At least we did it before anything, my house, went upside down. We got out of it, right? We escaped. And then credit didn't take a hit because, we did it in time. We're going to maybe, stay at mom and dad's or get in an apartment, for a year or two, kind of put this in savings, and then we'll re-enter the market when we're back on our feet, right? Having a game plan like that, but it's certainly not for somebody who's saying, no, this is my forever home. I want to stay here. I want to do all this stuff. My credit's really bad right now, and I need money because I want to go on vacation and I want to just blow it, and I'm not going to get any return on the money that I'm actually getting. I just want to have a lot of fun, right? Unfortunately, I talked about consumer ignorance earlier. You're going to have a lot of people, and I think a lot of these corporations and banking models are counting on consumer ignorance and saying, yeah, you're not ever going to get out of this. We have you by the collar here, and we're gonna gouge you now, right? And we're gonna make a whole lot of money off you.
And that's the scary thing, because frankly, all we have in this world is time.
Yeah.
And a lot of it has to be allocated to trying to make sure you plan for these things, or you trade your time to try to pay off these things. Mm-hmm. And that's sad to see people down at the end just making the circle and trading in their time. Again, you could almost say it's slavery. Mm-hmm. Right? I don't want to say that, but modern day economic slavery, where you're practically working to put in just to pay for interest, because quite frankly, about 70% of our income taxes are paid to the debt service. Mm-hmm. We owe debt service. So you would think that your income taxes are paying for the services that are provided, whether it's school, Social Security, what have you. But that's not the case. What happens is that our debt service has gone up so high that we have to print out money to be able to keep up with these services. So what does that do? That creates a bigger debt level, right? But debt ceilings have to go up. So then Congress continuously approves this. But again, there's promises on both ends, whether you're Republican or Democrat, that they're going to reduce the... That hasn't happened. That hasn't happened. Yeah. If anything, in the last 15 years, I think we've had more debt than we ever had in the whole creation of the U.S. Mm-hmm. So it's crazy to think that somehow we're magically going to bring those trillions of dollars of debt down without creating more money. So if our debt service is so huge, then what else do we do, right? I mean, I'm not saying this is a collapse, but typically this is how economies typically do go down. It's because of this. It's because of a responsibility of running. And history has never shown that fiat currency can survive. And this is where we're at today. But for the consumers, I mean, if I was Dave Ramsey, I would say, you know what? Don't use your home as your ATM. But it's hard to say that not knowing your situation. If you're constantly running around in this rat race, it's really difficult, because one, you have to eat. You have to use your car to take your kids to school. And that binds you to that employment, or to whatever it is that you're doing to keep you there, so that you're not out there, what's the word? You're not out there instigating, right? So the more people that you keep in that situation, it's really hard for you to look out and start thinking critically and saying, shit, wait a minute, man, is this even fair, man? Shit, I'm to the end. Yeah. I can't do nothing. And unfortunately, that's the situation that we find a lot of people in, is, it's just a tough situation to be in. Yeah. And you can't do nothing about that debt, and you have to take those steps or those measures to try to get yourself out of it, like you said, just to make it happen. Because if not, I'm out the street. I got nothing. But here, at least I have a lifeline. Yes, it's going to prolong me another 5-6 years, but that's okay. I can take care of my house. Hopefully, I can do what Abel said and get myself in a better situation than I am today.
Yeah. I'll just close. I mean, again, this is all assuming the job market stays the same. And I think that's the other element that is slowly coming up as corporations already start the contraction.
Fast foods are suffering.
All these, I think you're going to start seeing and that's where the danger comes, because again, they still have a job right now for the most part, but many of them are going to start seeing that job market shrink, even just a little bit. I don't see a full collapse, but they start firing 1-2 here and there just to make things make sense. I think you may see some of that. So I'm saying, I told people, I think you're going to see it by Christmas. That's going to be the tell, because if people can't buy the gift for their kid, or they can't give a good Christmas like they're used to, I think mentally that's where people may break loose a little bit.
But see, the feds have that, they have that ace up their hand.
They do, but I'm just saying, if it doesn't happen by then, regardless of who wins this election,
that's why it's so critical.
That's the breaking point.
I think it's so critical that in September, that they do drop those rates, because that's going to give some type of wind to these people that are no longer like you. Everybody's expecting it, right? Everybody's expecting it. Now, if you devastate that, then who knows what will take place?
Good to go.
Well, let us know your comments out there. What do you think? Where do you stand? Do you need to refinance? Call Jose.
That's right.
Have some guns in the safe. Need some cash? Call Rohi.
There you go. Stop by.
We have solutions here for you.
Before we leave, I did want to congratulate Abel. Abel is now running for the Madera Unified School Board trustee.
Yeah, thank
And
you
we
for
want to
that.
wish him the best. We're going to help him out to get out there, because he certainly brings a lot of good ideas to the school and our competitive sports. But aside from that, in education and academic careers. So we want to wish you well and know that you have support here with Rohi and I, and look forward to seeing you on that school board.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm really looking forward to rolling up my sleeves and contributing the best way that I can, and just really helping our community create a strong foundation for its future community leaders, right? And that by targeting our children and ensuring that they have the best possible foundation, I think we can do that, right?
Awesome.
So, well, thank you guys. If you have any comments, we'd like to hear them. Certainly would appreciate your subscriptions and your shares. And otherwise, we'll see you next week.